Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're exploring Pema Chodron's Start Where You Are.
Oh, a classic.
It's all about, well, compassionate living, and she really delivers some practical advice for handling, life.
Yeah, what always strikes me about Chodron is that she doesn't make compassion some impossible goal. She makes it practical, giving you tools to actually work with your mind and emotions right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like she's giving us this toolkit to deal with, all the ups and downs. And one of the first things she introduces is shamatha vipassana meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, the first time I saw that name, I thought, whoa, intense. But it's really not. It's actually super simple and grounding.
It really is. I mean, it all boils down to finding stillness, insight, all through something we do every day, breathing.
Okay, so how does this actually work? What does it look like in practice?
So picture this. You get comfortable, close your eyes if you want, and just focus on your breath. That's the shamatha part, the calming part. You breathe out and you just notice it. You know, that feeling of the breath leaving your body. No need to force it. Just be aware of it.
Okay, that sounds doable so far. But then, as soon as you try to quiet your mind, all the thoughts rush in. That's where Vipassana comes in.
Yeah, exactly. It's about understanding those thoughts, So they pop up, which, let's be real, they always will. It's what minds do. But you just label them, just thinking. No judgment. You're not trying to fight them off. Just a little acknowledgement.
So instead of getting swept away by those thoughts, we're taking a step back and just watching them go by, like watching clouds or something.
Yeah, exactly. And Chodron uses this great analogy. He talks about thoughts being like bubbles. And when you label them thinking, it's like you're, gently touching a bubble with a feather, poof, it's gone. It just dissolves. It's about realizing that thoughts, yeah, they feel real in the moment, but they're really just passing by. They don't define you.
I love that.
Yeah.
It makes meditation so much less intimidating because I don't know about you, but emptying my mind completely always seemed impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But this is about changing how we see those thoughts, not getting rid of them entirely.
Totally. And, this idea of thoughts being impermanent, fleeting, it all ties back to another concept, shunyata, or emptiness.
Okay, emptiness. I have to admit that word used to, put me off a bit. It seemed kind of bleak, But this idea of thought dissolving like those bubbles, it makes it, different.
It's not that things don't exist. It's more about recognizing that nothing stays the same. Think about it. Our bodies, our feelings, even our thoughts, they're always changing. Even the things we hold on to the tightest, like our opinions, our beliefs, even who we think we are, it's all in flux.
It's like, have you ever looked back at something you used to believe so strongly, and now you think, wait, did I actually think that? That's kind of shunyata in action, right? That everything's always unfolding.
Exactly. And once you really get that nothing stays fixed, that it's all in motion, it can be, pretty freeing. Because if things aren't permanent, then we don't have to cling so tightly. We can let go a little.
And in that letting go, it opens up space for something new, right? New ways of seeing things, new possibilities.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, this whole idea of shunyata, of impermanence, it's all connected to how we deal with those, those really vulnerable parts of ourselves.
You mean what Chodron calls our soft spot? That tender part we all have that we try so hard to protect.
Yes. And here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a soft spot. It's totally universal. But we try to build up walls around it, especially when we're hurting.
We think that if we act tough enough, we can avoid getting hurt. But those walls, they come at a price, don't they?
They really do. Because those walls we build to protect our soft spot, they also stop us from really connecting with people, from feeling that true intimacy, that real joy.
It's like we build a fortress around ourselves. Safe? Maybe, but lonely too.
Exactly. And it's in those moments when we feel most vulnerable, when we want to retreat, that Tonglen meditation can be so powerful.
Tonglen, it's a big one in Chodron's work. For anyone who's new to it, can you break it down?
So Tonglen, which means giving and taking, is all about cultivating compassion by leaning into suffering your own and other people's. It might sound kind of counterintuitive, but you actually visualize breathing in that darkness, the heaviness, any kind of pain. And then with each exhale, you breathe out light, peace, anything that feels open and positive.
So you're intentionally leaning into discomfort instead of running from it.
Yes. And Chödrön says, start small. Think of a specific thing you're struggling with, or maybe someone you love is hurting. Visualize breathing in that pain and then breathing out relief.
So if I'm feeling anxious, I'd actually picture breathing in that anxiety and then sending out calmness as I exhale.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. As you do, Tonglin, you start to connect with the fact that you're suffering, whatever it is, it's not just yours. So many other people have felt that same anxiety, that same pain.
It's like when you share something really personal and the other person's like, me too. You're not alone anymore.
Yeah, it's like that Me Too moment, you know. It reminds you we're not alone in what you're going through. And that's what Tomlin builds on, that shared experience.
So it starts with you and then expands outward to other people, even people we don't even know.
Exactly. And this is where Tonglin can get really, well, challenging. Because Chodron wants us to extend that compassion even to, our enemies, the people who've hurt us or just, drive us crazy.
Okay, yeah, I got to admit, that's where I struggle. Compassion for someone I love, sure. But the people who just push my buttons, how do I even start with that?
Well, it starts by realizing those people, those Juans and Juanitas, as Chodron calls them, they're usually reflecting something back at us. Like they're highlighting our own patterns, our own reactions, the stuff we do over and over again.
So it's like they're holding up this mirror, and sometimes we don't like what we see.
Exactly. And those moments when we feel triggered, when we just want to, get mad or shut down, those are actually huge opportunities for growth. Instead of avoiding those people, we can use them to practice compassion, to break those old habits.
So next time I run into one of my Juanitas, instead of getting defensive, I should try to take a step back. Ask myself, what's this really about? What's the lesson here?
Right. It's a huge shift in perspective, right? You go from seeing them as the enemy to seeing them as your best teacher.
Which leads to that Chödrön slogan, drive all blames into one. I gotta say, that one really made me think.
It's so simple, but it's really about taking responsibility for our own experience, which is hard. It's so easy to blame others, If they hadn't done that, I wouldn't feel this way. We've all been there.
Oh, for sure. Blame feels like an easy way out, but it never really is.
Exactly. Because even though someone else might be triggering those feelings, the anger, the hurt, it's coming from our own minds, our own patterns. And that one in the slogan, it's talking about our own ego, that part of us that's always trying to be right, to be in control.
So if we can see those feelings are coming from inside us, from our own stuff, then we can work with them differently. We don't have to just react automatically. We have a choice.
Exactly. It's not about beating yourself up for feeling angry or hurt. It's about seeing those feelings as coming from a place of fear, of insecurity. And when you see that, you can start to be kind to yourself. You can start to heal.
This reminds me of that story about Juan. You know that one?
Oh, yeah. Juan, the tough teenager caught up in violence. Yeah, it's such a powerful story about how powerful vulnerability can be.
Yeah, you've got this kid, Juan, stuck in this world of toughness. And then he meets this teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, who's not afraid to show his own vulnerability. And it changes everything for Juan.
It's like Rinpoche being so open, so real, it just broke through Juan's defenses in a way nothing else could.
It shows how those people who challenge us the most, our own Juans and Juanitas, can be the ones who teach us the most. They show us where we're stuck, where we're clinging to stuff that doesn't serve us anymore.
And they teach us that real strength isn't about putting up walls, It's about being brave enough to be open, to let yourself be vulnerable with yourself and with other people.
It's like that's where compassion comes from that willingness to be with those uncomfortable parts of ourselves and our relationships.
And that willingness to be present with discomfort, that leads us right to another Chödrön concept, the big squeeze.
Okay, big squeeze. Sounds a little intimidating. What is it, and why would we want to go near it?
Okay, so we all have these ideas about who we want to be, right? Like we want to be loving, compassionate people. But then, there's reality, Things get messy, someone pushes our buttons, and we react badly. The big squeeze is that tension between our ideals and how we actually are, the messiness of being human.
It's like that gap between what we say we believe and how we actually act. We have the best intentions, and then boom, we fall back into old habits.
Totally. And that gap, that tension, it's not something to be afraid of. That's where the real growth happens.
So it's not about beating ourselves up for not being perfect, for messing up. It's about learning to just be with those uncomfortable feelings, those moments when we feel squeezed, not try to escape them.
Exactly. And Chodron talks about how important patience is for this. And she doesn't mean like putting up with stuff. She means being present with the discomfort without letting it carry you away.
So not pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about being real with ourselves, about how we feel, even when it's tough.
Yes. And in that honesty, in that willingness to be present, that's where you find real compassion for yourself.
It's like remembering that we're all works in progress, even those people who drive us nuts.
For sure. And this brings up something else Chödrön talks about, the difference between real compassion and idiot compassion.
Idiot compassion. I love that phrase, but I have a feeling it's an important difference. What's the difference?
Idiot compassion is when we're trying to avoid our own discomfort, you know? We try to seem all loving and compassionate, but really we're just trying to be liked or avoid a fight or keep up a certain image, like putting on a mask, but underneath we're still trying to control everything.
So real compassion isn't about forcing ourselves to feel a certain way or pretending things are okay when they're not. It's about showing up authentically, even when it's hard.
You got it. Real compassion doesn't mean being perfect. It just means showing up with an open heart, with kindness, with honesty, in every moment, whatever that moment brings.
So it takes honesty, being willing to see where we're maybe even fooling ourselves, even if we have good intentions.
Exactly. And you know what's really interesting? Chodron says this compassion thing, it's not a solo journey. She talks about these 3 principal causes that help us along the way.
Okay, 3 principal causes. What are they, and how do they help us be more compassionate?
They are the teacher, the teachings and practices, and a precious human birth. And each one has a specific role in opening our hearts and deepening our compassion.
Let's start with the teacher. What makes a teacher a good guide for this compassionate living thing?
Well, first, it's important to understand what Chodron means by teacher. She's not talking about someone who just tells you what you want to hear or has all the answers. A real teacher, or sometimes she calls them a spiritual friend, is someone who's going to challenge you, help you see your blind spots.
It's like they say, real friends tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Exactly. A good teacher isn't afraid to make you uncomfortable, to call you out, because they want you to wake up to your full potential.
So, not about finding someone who'll boost your ego. It's about finding someone who helps you see yourself clearly, even if it means facing some tough truths on the way.
Exactly. And Chodron even says the role of the spiritual friend is to insult you.
Insult. That sounds kind of harsh. Not literally, right?
Of course not. It's not about being mean. It's about using skillful ways to help us see through our own self-deceptions, the ways we hold ourselves back.
So a good teacher might say something that stings a little at first, but they're doing it because they care. They want you to wake up.
Exactly. They're like holding up that mirror, and sometimes what we see isn't what we expected, but it's in those moments, those uncomfortable moments, that real change can happen.
It's about accepting those messy parts of ourselves, seeing them as worthy of love, too.
Yes. And it's through accepting ourselves that we can really start to accept others.
So the teacher helps us see ourselves, work with our own stuff.
Yeah.
What about the teachings and practices? How do they fit in?
The teachings and practices, those give us the tools to actually work with our minds and emotions. They give us guidance on how to actually be more compassionate, more mindful, wiser in our everyday life. It's like a toolbox full of different things to try.
So it's not just reading about it, it's about actually doing it, making it real.
Yes. That's where practices like meditation, that Tonglen we talked about, contemplating those Lojong slogans, they all become so important.
Like a roadmap for this whole compassionate living thing. We may not know exactly where we're going, but they help us stay on the path.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the better you get at handling all those curveballs life throws at you.
It's like building a muscle, right? The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And what about that third one? A precious human birth. What does that even mean?
That one always stops me in my tracks, It's about appreciating this incredible opportunity we have as humans to wake up, to cultivate compassion and wisdom. We've been given this amazing gift, this chance to really live, to make a difference, but we forget that so easily.
It's true. We get caught up in the day-to-day and forget how amazing it is to even be here.
Right. And Chodron says this precious human birth, it's not something to waste. It's an invitation to really make the most of this life, to use our time and energy in a way that matters. It's a call to live with intention, to cultivate compassion and wisdom, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we're spending our time and energy, doesn't it? Are we living in a way that feels meaningful, a way that honors this chance we've been given?
Totally. And this whole idea of waking up, of not wasting this precious human life, it ties into another one of those slogans, abandon any hope of fruition. It might sound kind of strange, but she's really talking about letting go of that idea that happiness or enlightenment is something you get in the future. It's about realizing those seeds of joy, of peace. They're already here inside us right now.
So we can stop chasing some perfect future and just relax into this moment.
Yeah, it's about accepting things as they are, including those parts of ourselves we don't love, Those imperfections, they're not something to get rid of. They're actually how we get to a deeper compassion.
I love that. Those flaws we all have, They're not something to be ashamed of. They're opportunities to grow, to connect.
Exactly. And Chodron even says we should see those tough emotions. The anger, the jealousy, even fear as expressions of Buddha, not as something bad to push away.
Wow, that's a really different way of looking at those feelings, the ones we usually try so hard to avoid. What does she mean by seeing them as Buddha?
It's like realizing those emotions, even the messy ones, they're just part of being human. They're not inherently bad. It's when we resist them, when we try to pretend they aren't there, that's when we suffer.
So instead of thinking, ugh, I shouldn't be feeling this, we can be curious about them. Be kind to ourselves.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what's this feeling telling me? What can I learn here? That's how we start to accept ourselves, and that's where compassion for ourselves starts.
And then that self-compassion, it naturally flows outward to other people, right?
Absolutely. And, self-acceptance, it's not just some fluffy idea. It changes how we live, how we treat other people. And that's where those naked truth slogans come in.
Oh yeah, those are great. So direct, so honest. Remind us what those are all about.
Those slogans, they all start with don't. And they're like, these little bits of advice on how to live a better life, Little reminders to catch ourselves when we're falling back into old habits. They help us make a different choice.
And naked because they don't mess around. Like they tell it like it is.
Right. They're like, a bucket of cold water, waking us up to those patterns that cause suffering for everyone.
So what are a few of them? That one, don't talk about injured limbs. That always gets me. What's that one about?
That one's all about our tendency to gossip, to focus on the negative stuff, to point out everyone else's flaws. It reminds us that talking about people behind their backs, it doesn't help anyone. It just creates more distance, more negativity.
Oh, I know that one. It's so easy to get sucked into gossip, especially when I'm feeling insecure. It's like we try to feel better by putting others down.
Totally. And sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're just telling a story. But this slogan, it reminds us to be careful with our words, to be kind, even when no one's watching.
And then there's, don't try to be the fastest, which, especially these days, feels so important. Why is it good to slow down?
That one's about letting go of that need to be right all the time, to win every argument. It reminds us that communication isn't about just getting our own point across. It's about really hearing the other person, even when we don't agree. It's about understanding, connecting.
It's so easy to get caught up in needing to have the last word.
Right. But it usually just leads to more arguments, more separation. So this slogan, it's like a little reminder to be humble, to remember that everyone has their own perspective, their own truth. We can always learn something.
Okay, how about this one? This one I need tattooed on my hand. Don't bring things to a painful point. Ouch.
Yeah.
But important. What's that one all about?
It's about remembering that our words, our actions, they can hurt people. And real compassion means being aware of that. It's about choosing kindness instead of criticism, being there for someone instead of judging them.
Being aware of how what we do and say lands on other people, especially if they're already hurting.
Right. Sometimes the kindest thing is to just be there, to listen without judgment.
Okay, last one. And this feels like a big one. Always maintain only a joyful mind.
But life isn't always joyful, right? How do we do that when things are tough?
It doesn't mean pretending everything's perfect. It's about looking for the good, finding those moments of joy, even when things are hard. Being thankful for the little things like, being able to breathe, being able to talk to someone, the beauty around us.
So it's about realizing that happiness, that joy, it's not something we have to wait for. It's here now if we open ourselves to it. Exactly. And that, I think, is the heart of what Pema Chodron is saying about compassionate living. It's about starting right here with all our flaws, with kindness and curiosity. We already have what we need to be happy and to live with compassion.
It's about letting go of that need to control, to have everything figured out, and just being present in this moment. And when we do that, that's where real happiness comes from. Not from outside stuff, but from that compassion we all have inside us. So as you go about your day, think about how you can bring that compassion into everything you do, every thought you have. Even those little acts of kindness, they matter. They can make the world a little brighter, a little more joyful.
Don't forget, this compassionate living thing, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, being real, especially when it's tough. We all have that potential to make the world a kinder place.